So it's a pleasure to be here. I haven't been in Ireland since I was on a post-university trip of trying lots of beers with some friends from Canada who have Irish grandparents. So it's good to be back in a work sense now over here. So I love to tell people I'm the recovering American in the room. So I've been here now in Europe, but basically in London for the past 9 years. And I was really excited when Liam gave me the call to come have this discussion today. And I think data ethics sometimes can be one of those things that maybe doesn't massively fill a room, but I think we've done a good job today, and our earlier speakers I think have talked a lot of interesting topics. So hopefully I'm going to start taking you guys into what it's like to turn all of you into data professionals or aspiring data professionals through the presentation. We'll see if I get maybe 10% of you there, but I like to think that everyone is actually a data person. And so hopefully you'll come on that journey with me. So for a little perspective, so I always like to think that it's really important to understand the lens that someone is wearing when they present to you. And also all of you are going to be absorbing this in whatever your upbringing and education and work-life balance have brought to you. But I started my career in data at ChoicePoint. So honestly, not many people know what that is, especially because it's a US company, or was a US company based in Atlanta, Georgia. It spun out of Equifax. So most people have heard of Equifax, or over here, Experian. So it's basically a really big credit bureau, and the piece of the business I joined, ChoicePoint, did lots of stuff with insurance. And it was all around if someone had an auto accident, were they really hurt, or were they always lying about accidents? And so it was a big database on loads of basically car crashes and various accidents and stuff like that. And then the business moved into kind of terrorist tracking and DNA analysis and pre-employment screening and precision marketing. And all of a sudden you find out, wow, pretty much all that data that's out there can be used to track down bad guys, or it can be used to try to sell you something. So isn't that interesting? Two sides of the coin. Then I moved into, after a stint in business school, where I like to say I learned marketing, because I studied poli-sci and Spanish, but maybe there's a little bit of marketing in there. Any of you who've gone to the polls recently, you hear lots of rhetoric, and then hopefully someone's convincing you to vote for them. So maybe it wasn't that far of a difference. But at IBM, I spent 10 years getting indoctrinated with the other kind of science, computer science, and actually was forced to code a little bit, and then realized, nope, my calling is still marketing and strategy, so I'll stick with that. But it was a great time to learn about basically all the technologies that hold, move, clean, analyze, etc. data. And then I moved into Dentsu Aegis 2 years ago as the Chief Data and Product Officer of EMEA. And pretty much when I came over here, I said, as much as I'd love my time at IBM, I really think data should be in the front office. And it should be something that is actually with the marketing, with the CEO, with the CFO, and not in IT. And that IT is really important, and you still need data mapping and data governance. But if we really want to be serious about what we're going to do with data, especially relating to privacy and ethics, we need that in the front office related to revenue and what the business does. So that is the lens I am bringing today. So Dentsu Aegis Network, to be honest, I didn't know who it was. I didn't know who Dentsu was 2 years ago. But they did show up on my feeds when I saw them buy a company called Merkle for around £1 billion or dollars or euros, whatever the number was. It's still very big. And Merkle is basically a really big company that has made its business around CRM data. So when I saw Dentsu purchase Merkle, I said, wow, here's a company that has this breadth and scale of now 47,000 people. Almost $4 billion in revenue, that's managing spend in media and marketing for these types of clients. And I thought, wow, the power of where this company is going, being very digitally native, being very focused on trying to move to people-based marketing, to make sure that essentially you're talking to the consumer in the way they want to be talked to, but at the same time with the advent of GDPR, with what's happening in Vermont, California, across the US with legislation, with what Catherine said about South America, how are we making sure we're not talking to them when they don't want us to talk to us? So I really think it's been a really great adventure the past 2 years, because we have had a huge tidal change. And I think that the view of this crazy wild, wild west of programmatic, which I got to know a little bit when I was at IBM, because I worked with the weather company. So IBM bought the weather company, if you had seen that. And it wasn't for the data, but for the platform. But I worked with the people who had the data. And if you read the New York Times on occasion, which I do still, there's a huge article that followed into a journalist looking at how companies like the weather company, Google, can literally track where you are, what cell phones are pinging a tower. And they did this huge set now on the privacy project in the New York Times, which showed Americans how much their data was signaling even their 11-year-old kid who had a phone in the school. So it's really starting to pick up the attention. I think, like you said about Cambridge Analytica, the Brexit, the Uncivil War with Benedict Cumberbatch that was out lately about the whole Brexit Remain. And I have to give it to Dominic and the Leave team. I mean, they basically said, the data's available. We know who we can sway. It's these people in the middle, so let's just hit them as hard as we can with these Facebook ads. And I think on the side of what's ethical and what's not ethical, I mean, I have my opinion. I don't think that's ethical what they did, but some people do, right? And I think that's the scary, slippery slope we're at now, where it's literally you're putting kind of like, let's figurative guns in the hands of certain people who are using data in a ruthless kind of way. I also do worry about the fact that while in Europe we have these laws and the US is starting to pick up, other countries don't feel the same way. And I think you see playing out right now in the press in England about Huawei and the 5G, right? So we are facing this everywhere in our world right now. What are the ethics of how fast the data can move around of technology? So anyway, these are some of the brands you work with. Back to point. Okay. So what I want to do now is I want to go into some, hopefully some fun interactive sections for all of you to think about data and the lens that you wear, because we're all wired differently. So as much as our family upbringing, and if we're a brother or a sister or any kind of things you have in your family, and the school you went to and the town you grew up in or the village, there's certain things that happen with our eyes and our ears, which is literally just down to the way our brain is wired. So in the first bit, this is from 1915, a long time ago, but it's Rubens' fill in the blank, right? Some of you are going to see the white first, and other ones will see the black, but eventually you'll be able to see both. But your brain is trying to make sense of, is this Rubens' vase? Or is it actually two profiles looking at each other? So that's the first thing to think about. How do you interpret that bit of data, right? It's an image, but I'm going to call it data. The second thing, do you remember the dress in 2015? So 1915 to 2015, we have this viral sensation that literally has its own wiki page. Who sees the black and the blue? All right, who sees the gold and the white? Yes, so it's amazing that literally it is your brain and your eyes quieting one part of this imagery and ramping up the other. And then just in, I think it was like 2018, I think that's what, last year, or 2017 maybe, it was 2017, the Yanni versus Laurel. So this went to an auditory phenomenon. So I encourage you, when you're on your way back, go back to this page and play Yanni versus Laurel. And it's literally because of the way your ear into your brain is managing the soundtrack. So most of the time people would hear one before the other, and I think a lot of this ended up people could hear both. How many people do you remember doing this exercise? And oh no, some people didn't. This is so exciting. You can do something cool when you leave on data. You're going to become a data expert. You'll know which one you hear better. But it's one of those things that I really think goes back to what is the lens that literally is built into your humanity. You cannot change this. Like, this is just what is going on with your own body. Now the next one, I think also has to do with maybe your schooling, or if you like maths or not, or if you like numbers, because I'd like to say numbers and maths don't always go together. Maybe that's a stretch, but go with me on this one. So this is the interactive bit where I'm going to look for someone from the back, someone from the middle, and someone from anywhere else to try to volunteer 3 more numbers that will match the pattern that I have on the screen. And if you've seen this trick before, you can't participate. So, you're going to go for it, Chanda?
8, 10, 12.
Good. 8, 10, 12. Yeah, that works. That works. Nice one. Good. Someone else be brave.
10, 16, 26.
Yeah? Okay. See? It's really easy. One more. Come on. Be crazy with your numbers.
3, 5, 7.
3, 5, 7. Yes, that works. So, are you ready for what it was? Numbers in descending order. That's my pattern. Literally, you could have said anything. I know when I saw this, I'm like, clearly, it's going to be even numbers, or it's going to be odd numbers in a sequence. So the confirmation bias that's inherent in the 2, 4, 6 is everything you've had in your life up to now that would suggest, why would this be ascending numbers? That's just too easy, right? It's got to be some sort of square root or a multiple or something like that. So literally, that's all of your upbringing to now. They would have said that is the pattern, but it's also because we as humans want to put a pattern on things. So notice I didn't say it was just random. That would have even been better. You could have told me any number and it would have fit the pattern. So that's really important, I think, for all of us to recognize is you have what's hardwired into your brain. what part gets amplified and what part is quiet. And then on top of that, you have everything in your life up to now that's telling you, this is how this fits. This is how I can make sense of this. This is an elephant. I'm going to run the other direction because for my humanity to survive, right, going all the way back to when we were growing up in the wild, we needed to see the patterns of something is bad or good here. So with that, again, if you have 45 minutes to spare next time you're doing the commute or wherever you might be on a flight or something like that, Invisibilia is a podcast I listen to a lot. National Public Radio is our version of the BBC in America, and they do a lot of cool stuff. And so what I listened to was their episode on the pattern problem. And what I loved about this is being, again, a political scientist who, by way of career at IBM, became maybe sort of a computer scientist. I thought about the fact that loads of people are buying so much software to collect all this data. And they're like, oh, in the data, I will find the answer. And I can't tell you how many projects I worked on at IBM where people said, we will build a giant data lake, put all the data in there, and we'll know the answer. We'll just ask the data the question. It's just going to like materialize, like, whoosh, like my hair's on fire now. Oh my God, they're going to buy more Unilever products because of this reason, or more yogurt, or whatever the case may be. That's kind of not how it works. Sorry to say, just putting all the data doesn't do that. And one of my favorite stories from this podcast was about a sociologist called Sarah McLaughlin, who back in 1998, I think, released all of the work she'd done for 20 years on 5,000 families with their children going from 0 to 15. And it was all about how these children evolved, were they encouraged by their parents, what were their grades like, literally just sociology 101 down to what are these questions, let's check in multiple times a year. And she kept all of it, you know, on kind of a piece of paper and then moved it into some sort of digital format. And then Matt, who's another professor of sociology at Princeton where she was working, said, hey, let's use one of these machine learning techniques on this. You have a huge amount of data, 5,000 children, 20 years, loads of attributes. Maybe we can start predicting what makes a child have a high GPA, grade point average. What will make a child successful or not? How do we start to learn from patterns in the data? Because my gosh, you've been so meticulous about what you've kept. We can orient all of this against a big database, and we can then do a hackathon like Netflix did, famously, I think in 2006, if you remember that. Netflix put all of its data out there on the web for thousands of people to compete with, and everyone just said, make our algorithm better. Well, the same idea was here. Let's hack our sociology data. So the best part about this is when they got to the end, and most of the time for statistical significance, you want essentially the bars being really high. So if you imagine a picture of, here's the, you know, the X and Y axis, and you're going through all these different things that would be predictive or not, and the way the lady describes it is she's like, you had a lot of short, stumpy bars, like way down here, that basically said, no. And I loved it, because I'm like, yes, you cannot predict life. you literally, like chance and luck and everything else that happens, we can't predict lives. So I was really pleased with that. But the other bit is she interviewed the head of one of the Microsoft research tanks, Duncan, whose last name I forgot, but it's in the episode. And he said, you know what people hate? People hate that the answer is things are random. Right? Everyone wants to have an answer. And so especially as a chief data officer, I was like, sometimes the answer is this is not predictable, right? So you've got all the data together, you've spent how many millions of dollars on your data lake and all the personnel, and the answer is not any better than what you did before with just intuition and maybe some pilot survey groups. So I think as much as data and stuff has gone on, some things you can't predict. And I think when you really get to behavior and passion and cultures and daily life, I think that's hard. Now, on the other hand, when you're looking at patterns that are point and click by this thing, point and click by this thing, well, if you have enough of that data, you start to get to statistical significance. And you start to know that people who look like this in this demographic, who do this thing, are probably wanting to buy such and such. So if you think about Google as essentially dominating the internet as like the gateway into what is out there, the next big battle is over voice search. So if you think about all the text search we've grown up with, imagine the children. I have boys right now that are 5 years old, nearly. It's all voice related, right? So all those Google Homes and Siris and Alexas that are floating around, listening to your voice, listening to the things you say, starting to put algorithms together about what is the most commonly talked up thing. How do we make the next Game of Thrones if you're Netflix or HBO? And so it's really interesting now as the amount of data that's available in the hands, as we discussed earlier, a very small number of companies. But again, you're not predicting a life pattern here. You're literally predicting a purchase pattern, or you're predicting some interest area. And that starts to have significance in terms of the reason why we see Cambridge Analytica as a really good example of when you're looking at a particular choice, you can narrow the data to that way. So this is where the data ethics and the people behind that. Kaggle is a company that I think Google actually acquired about 3 years ago, and it was essentially a community of data scientists. 90% of them were men, and then 90% of the men were of a particular kind of, let's say, ethnic background. If you look at Google, 70% of their staff is also men, mostly white or Asian background. So if you start thinking about every single line of machine algorithm code being written by people who have similar wiring, similar auditory, similar upbringing, the importance of people with ethics and people with very different disciplines coming into data science or informing how those machine learning patterns are written is absolutely critical to our society survival, if I get that out there on it. But I think it is very worrisome when there's a very small population that's essentially writing the algorithms that are deciding everything. And that's where Google has done a lot now, and Facebook, they're trying to attract more, but I think the one stat I saw in The Guardian was 2% of all of Google's staff are African American, and it's even smaller once you get into the people who do data science. So, but then you compare that to the US government, and the US government was up at 25% for technical staff. So it's not like it's not possible, right? So I think that's really, really critical. And if you think about how many people are Irish, right? I honestly believe that your country gives you a different, or your nationality, it gives you a different perspective. So the idea of having diverse data teams, and it doesn't have to be everyone's a data scientist, right? I know what to do with data, but I'm not writing all the algorithms. So I think it's quite important, and especially as we have this going on from a consumer point of view where we're actively engaging with the technology. What about when it's Internet of Things and it's drones and it's bots? So let's look at this.
The Olympics is a huge global stage for our team, and it's the most watched event in the world. Every time we do a show, there's always a surprise. When we thought about the opportunity at the opening ceremony, there's no doubt we had to push ourselves.
How do we prep for the Olympics before we're even on site? There were so many tests that the teams did in Germany and in Finland. Before we came to Korea, we had a plan. We had an agenda. We knew wins were going to be tough.
Basically a last-minute checklist of what we're going to go through to make sure we're ready to fly and make sure that the weather is okay. The landscape here is cold, snowy, icy, with very, very high winds.
There have been a lot of challenges.
What do you mean the animation's over there?
We can't fly in that area.
We have not the field without network right now.
Is it launching?
No.
You can never predict weather. Let's take a step back and see how we can solve together.
We always find a way. We've mostly done shows about 300, so to jump to 1,200,
It's been a huge team effort. World records are meant to be broken.
We are a minute and a half to launch, about 3.5 minutes until animation.
every late night, all the sacrifices.
Our fingers are crossed. My heart's pounding.
30 seconds to launch.
Everyone is a little bit quieter.
5,
4, 3,
2,
1, launching. Three, two, one, trigger.
It's hard to describe watching a drone light show live.
When you see 1,200 drones traveling up the snowy mountain,
It's so memorable. There's nothing like it in the world.
That was incredible.
I think you get the point. Drones are here, they're happening, they're everywhere. Some of you, who has a drone in their garden that they're using to just fly around for fun? Anyone? One of my friends took one on safari. It's actually a good idea. I was like, that's kind of cool. Good place to have one. But I think this is something to think about. And I was at the Huxley Summit that the British Science Association runs every year last year. And there's a woman who works at a military drone company who spoke, who used to work in the George H. Bush administration and security. And she said it's not the drones themselves, but we have to make sure, again, the people writing the machine learning algorithms in the drones, it's how people are using the drones. These are actually a positive improvement for society for many reasons, but we have to think about what we're unleashing at the same time. So going back to the ethics of the people who are building them, and then how do we make it a cultural norm to make the right decision, right? That's really the important bit that's on all of us. So I think the thing that does worry me, though, is when you have loads of data around a contextual behavior of this purchasing, and the fact that we talked about earlier, Catherine, that a lot of these companies, especially these two, right, more so built for advertising. Well, their model is advertising more than anything. It's advertising because that was a way to make money off of the data and the platform. So as a result, these companies depend on the data and the resale of it, and will do everything they can do to try to protect that particular business model. Whereas you look at some of these other companies, Microsoft, okay, yeah, for a while there, their operating system was under threat for antitrust. They have Xbox, they own LinkedIn, so they also have a lot of data. But first and foremost, Microsoft is a technology company, very much like Apple. You've got IBM and you've got Amazon. So Amazon now is the one to watch out for, right? Most people say, I don't like Amazon, but they deliver on the brand promise, and therefore I like them. And so all of a sudden, Amazon now is moving to this area where they probably know people even better because they've got the supply chain attached. So we're literally moving into this new area where, forget about Google looking at your search habits and what you watch on YouTube. Now it's about literally what do you purchase. And they've bought into, I think, NFL sports in America. They're buying into more TV. So all of a sudden, you're going to have 3 or 4 mega companies that pretty much know a lot about everyone's behavioral habits. So this is why I know you were already in public service. I know I started my career in politics. I'm definitely going to go back because we need more people from our industry who know what the hell's going on to start shaping these laws so that it's a fair playing field. And I think it's up to us as well to go to our schools, to our churches, our synagogues, wherever you are, and make sure people are cognizant of how important it is what they're giving away. And so like you said, you click the accept bar, right? That, oh yeah, okay, I'm just going to buy into this. I know I've taken myself off almost every Facebook platform. So yes, we do a lot of work with brands, but brands want to be where the eyeballs are. And so the way people can start to boycott is move to smaller platforms. Yes, the network effect is smaller, but there are other options, not to mention just going to someone's house, which I know is a very crazy idea. But I think that's what has to happen, right? People have to realize that there is a pretty big trade-off for what you're doing. And again, it's back to that privacy paradox, the consent paradox, that people know they're doing it and think, oh, I can't undo it. And I just keep seeing all these things about digital detoxes now, and people realizing somehow they can survive without their second aunt, once removed, going on vacation and posting a picture somewhere. They don't need to see that. Not to mention the number of young people who are now in counseling because social media is performing this kind of alternate reality where everything looks perfect. So there are things that we need to do to evolve so this industry can still give us the great things it has by making the world smaller, but in a safer way. So this is where I kind of round up what can all of us do in our daily lives, what can we do in our companies, what can we do in any organization we work in on the side. Basically, you need to have domain experts involved in any kind of work that you're doing now. Like, who is the person who understands digital, who understands the policies that are going on, but who also understands the data that wraps that all up together. So it's pretty much like, if you think about Jamie, he may have started from a legal lens, but now he has the data lens. And now you add into that all the technology. You know, I started from the data lens, went into technology, now I'm in advertising. So having folks who can think about the intersection of these domains on teams with people who are the purists in that particular area, you add to that the technology vendors, and trying to do the right thing with that technology, whether it's a Salesforce, an Adobe, a Google, a Segment IQ, whatever the company is that's local to you, how are you using that technology in the right way, knowing those choices and the moral dilemmas you go. And ultimately, I do hope all of us think about every decision as kind of a consumer, but also a citizen. And I think that's probably the most important thing, because all of us who work with brands, you're thinking about how can I influence someone to buy this, but how would I want to be influenced? How would I want my child to be influenced? How would I want a citizen in my town to be influenced? And so it's really important that I really do believe that from lessons from the ethical data lens, it's about having diverse teams, not only in skill set, but also in age, in gender, in sexual preference, in education. All of that is going to give us a much better answer and way forward as we tackle these issues. What I want to wrap up with is every year Dentsu Aegis does the Digital Society Index in combination with Oxford Economics. So this year we actually tapped into some of the trends that we've talked about today. So if you want to read the study, use any of those stats in your next presentation or with your teams back home, I think it's really important, again, we get out there and realize there's positive and negative to the digital transformation.
Thank you.